chapter 21. We're going to look at Peter's redemption because I believe that every single one of us as Christians, even washed in the blood, that we struggle in our faith, we struggle in our walk with the Lord, and we are all still seeking redemption. You know, it may seem like a silly question to ask, but how do you want people to treat you when you fail? Do you want the chance to get a do-over? Do you want a second chance? Or do you really fundamentally feel as though when you fail, you really deserve to be pushed out, to be ostracized? Again, it sounds silly to ask that, but you know, sometimes we punish ourselves. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And sometimes we're not sure we deserve a second chance, but I think that we all, deep down, really want a chance to do things over again, a chance to correct the wrongs that we make in our lives. Everyone wants to be forgiven. Everyone wants to be able to learn from their mistakes without losing respect of people they love and trust, without losing their status in life. That's just part of being human. I know of no one who would intentionally elect to be rejected or to lose a part of their identity just because of a failure. Well, in those first 14 verses of John 21, they tell the story of the time Jesus appeared to, or of the third time, I should say, that Jesus appeared to His disciples. We were talking last night about those resurrection appearances and how important it was for Jesus to show Himself bodily and whole to those disciples to reassure them that this was all real, that their faith was not futile. Here on this third occasion, we find Peter dismayed by his failure, expecting to be marginalized, expecting to be ostracized, and getting up one day and returning to fishing. Peter and his brother Andrew, along with the sons of Zebedee, were the first four that were originally called by Jesus to be His disciples in Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. We know that all four of those fishermen immediately, the text says, left their nets and followed Jesus. Just a few days after the death and resurrection of Jesus, Peter and 6 other of Jesus' disciples went back fishing. Peter, it says there in the text very plainly, he just, I guess, looked around at all of them and said, I'm going fishing. And those 6 others, they joined in and said, we're going with you. Again, you know, last night we looked at them locked inside that room before that first time they saw Jesus again. They were still unsure about their life, about their future. And here, just a few chapters later, a dismayed Peter, struggling for something to hang on to. Even though Jesus has appeared to him, he's still struggling with his faith. He's struggling with his denials, and he's wondering what to do. And he says, I'm going fishing. The only thing he knew to do. And that night, it says that they caught nothing. In a move that to me is reminiscent of Luke chapter 5, where Jesus, again, walking on the seashore earlier in their relationship, Jesus walking along the seashore sees these men struggling, pulling in a net, cleaning a net of a night of fishing where they caught nothing. And Jesus tells them to launch out again after they've come in from a hard night of fishing, cleaning those nets. He says, I want you to go back out there. Luke chapter 5. And launch out into the deep. He said, I will make you fishers of men. Here again, Jesus stood on the seashore and told them to cast their nets on the other side. John recognized that. He recognized that repeated pattern, and he told Peter, that's the Lord. You see, all that night, just like back in Luke chapter 5, all on their own, they caught nothing. But as soon as Jesus came into the picture and gave them instructions, they were successful. It's important to note here that going back fishing, this wasn't what Jesus had for them to do. And so here again, He's coming to them, reassuring them, pointing them in the right direction. Impulsively, as we might expect, Peter, it says that he had already taken off his outer garment and then put it back on once he knew that it was Jesus and went back into the water. That sounds like the opposite of what we would do, right? We'd strip down as far as we could before we jump back into the water, right? But Peter puts on his outer garment, puts on his cloak, jumps into the water and wades or swims to shore, while the others haul the net to shore in the small boat. That morning, that third appearance of Jesus, it tells us that they sat down on the shore and had breakfast together with Jesus. Verses 15 through 19, I want you to look with me. Jesus and Peter have a conversation that I believe deserves our attention as we think about our own lives and how we want to be treated when we make mistakes, when we do things that in our own mind are really awful. And when the kind of things that would make us wonder, how can God forgive me for this? So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." He said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" I'm sure he's wondering, "Lord, why are you rubbing it in?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Most assuredly, I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish." This he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." Verse 20 says, "Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who also had leaned upon his breast at the supper, and said, 'Lord, who is this who betrays you?'" I'm not going to go on. You can read that for yourself. But I wanted to go on to verse 20 there for a reason, because it shows that Jesus and Peter had gotten up. I just can kind of imagine that Jesus sort of tapped Peter on the shoulder or grabbed him by the arm and said, "Come on, let's take a walk." And I can just imagine Jesus with his arm up on Peter's shoulder, and Peter probably may have even joined in and put his arm on Jesus' shoulder, and the two of them walking down the shore with the others behind them, the fire, them still eating breakfast on the shore. And here's Jesus walking Peter down the beach, having a conversation with him. "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" I believe that Jesus, this is Peter's redemption. I believe that Jesus has come alongside Peter to reassure him and to point him in the right direction and to show him that "I love you, Peter," bringing him back into the fold, giving him the assurance that denying him 3 times was not enough to send him into the abyss, that Jesus had forgiven him. And that he was far too valuable for Jesus to just let him go and let him wander off on his own and let him be unsure for the rest of his life and not waste his talent. He pulls him back in. And he asks him this question 3 times. Do you love me more than these? That first time he asks Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? You know, I believe if you analyze that, you can probably take that question about 3 different ways. First of all, I think that you could take it as if Jesus was asking him, do you love me more than the rest of these men back there at the fire? Do you love me more than these back there? You could take it as Jesus asking him, do you love me more than you love your brothers? You could take it, do you love me more than you love these boats and nets and fish in the sea? I believe that all 3 of those are plausible. And is it any wonder that Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me? 1 time at least for each of those 3 denials maybe? That there's some correlation between those 2 things? The 3 times that Jesus asks Peter if he loves him, Jesus uses the word, the first 2 times, he uses the word agape. Simon, do you agapao? Do you agape me? You know that word agape, Jim Smeal, who used to teach Greek down at Heritage Christian University, he always said that, you know, before Jesus came on the scene, in classical Greek, agape meant very little. It was just sort of nondescript. But yet Jesus gave agape its meaning by using it and doing all of the great things that he did to people who the rest of the world would look and say, they don't deserve this. Jim said, Jesus gave agape its meaning. And so it's no wonder that he would use that. Peter is using, he responds all 3 times with the word for love that meant brotherly love, phileo love. He says, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. I love you like a brother. You know that. And Peter, in his mind, is thinking, this is the greatest form of love that I can share with this man. Peter believes that he is giving the Lord the greatest honor and form of love. It is important to note that both of them use those different words for love until Jesus asks that question a 3rd time. Because on the 3rd time, Jesus uses the same word as Peter. He asks, Simon, do you love me like a brother? Do you even love me as a brother? And the text says there that on this third occasion that Peter's grieved, that Jesus would have to ask. You know, there's a realization there. He's grieved because there's this realization that he doesn't believe me. He's doubting me. He's doubting my love for me. Maybe he's rubbing it in. He's asking me 3 times because I denied him 3 times. He's grieved that Jesus keeps pressing this matter. He's grieved because he is reminded of those 3 times. You know, no other, to me, this is an opinion, okay? No other gospel writer tells this better than Luke. In Luke 22, verse 31 beginning, the Lord tells Peter, he says, Simon, Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. But I prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, he knew he was going to come back strengthen your brothers. He said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. He said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me. Now jump over just another page or two in your Bibles to verses 60 and 61. Verse 60 is the 3rd time that Peter says, man, I don't know what you're talking about. They said, hey, you're one of them. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. Immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. Look at this, verse 61. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Their eyes met. Sends chills up and down your spine, doesn't it? Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he said to him, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. And it says that Peter went out and bitterly wept. Well, that would make you cry. He told me this was going to happen. I failed. I had one thing to do, and that was to keep my faith. And I failed the one who loved me. I failed my master. All 3 times Peter comes back to Jesus. He says, Lord, you know I love you. Did he know? The 3rd time Peter responds emphatically, saying it twice in essence, you know that I love you. Every time Jesus comes back to him with this command, feed my sheep, tend my sheep. First Jesus said, feed my lambs. I started preaching at a little congregation up in Tennessee, just south of Fayetteville. As you're going up 231 there from Huntsville up to Fayetteville, Tennessee, there's a little crossroads up there that's called Park City. When you make a right there on the highway at that 4-way stop and go past Prospect Baptist Church, you take a left on the next road, McDougal Road, and there sits Park City Church of Christ. Well, if you go on out that road toward Howell Hill, Tennessee, some of you know where that is. And I know you go to Fayetteville. Those of you who like to sew, I know you go to Sir's Fabrics up there. Spend a lot of time up there. I knew Mr. Sir for a brief time. But I had the opportunity to go to a farm where they raised sheep. And I can still remember them bringing me in the barn. And they knew that I grew up in the country and around farming and did, some various things on the farm growing up. And so they put this little lamb into my arms. Wool was just black and it was soft. And this little creature just was so content to sit there in my arms. It's just a little bitty thing. If you pick up a puppy and it just wiggles and it jiggles and it licks and it nips at you. I'm not a dog person, okay? I just got out of the dog business. Don't plan to ever get back in it. Even with kids at home, I know a lot of you like dogs and you want to defend your dog. Oh, mine's better than that. Listen, this little animal, this sweet little creature, this docile little lamb, it just sat there and it was just as content to sit there and be warm in my arms and just be content. I mean, it was the sweetest thing. Those of you who love animals can to me, it's just, you can see how people would get attached. And so it's no wonder that Jesus, with that attachment, that great attachment to his sweet people, his sheep, he knows that if we ever had the chance to fall into his arms, that we would be content. I think it's no wonder that, I believe it's Luke 16 that says that the poor man, Lazarus, was in the bosom of Abraham, and he was just like that sweet little lamb in my arms, in the arms of Father Abraham, content just to be held, comforted. Second, Jesus commanded Peter to shepherd his sheep. And the verb that is used there is the same root word that is used throughout the New Testament for church elders. Shepherding is what shepherds do. Jerry Barber is famous for saying, when shepherds shepherd shepherds, shepherds are far more likely to shepherd the sheep. And when shepherds do not shepherd the sheep, when shepherds don't shepherd shepherds, the shepherds are less likely to shepherd the sheep. I think that's a pretty good saying if you don't get your tongue tied. Jerry Barber's good at coming up with those things. Peter was given a new task to be a shepherd, and Jesus wanted Peter to dedicate his life in service to the kingdom and not to fishing for a living. In 1 Peter chapter 5, we realize, or we understand that Peter got it. And many years later, he writes in 1 Peter chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, "The elders who are among you I exhort, I who am a fellow elder." Who better to talk to elders than an elder? "And a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed, shepherd the flock of God, which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion but willingly, not for dishonest gain but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away." If we go back to John 21 and we look at verses 18 and 19, this is probably a passage other than Jesus asking Peter 3 times do you love me? And Peter's response to that. These are probably words that may confound you somewhat. "Most assuredly, I say to you," Jesus says to Peter, "when you were younger, you girded yourself and you walked where you wished. But when you're old, you're going to stretch out your hands and another is going to gird you and carry you where you do not wish." Interesting, isn't it? At first glance, we might begin to think about old age and that Peter was going to die of old age. And that was going to be the death that glorified God. But I don't believe that that's at all what Jesus was talking about. That he would have to be clothed by someone else because he was just too old and feeble to put his own clothes on. I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about. Tradition tells us that Peter was crucified and that he had even elected to be crucified upside down because he didn't feel that he deserved to die in the same way that the Lord had. I don't know if that's true. It's tradition. I don't know if upside down that was even possible. But you know, when it comes to the Romans, if it was cruel, they did it. If it was excessively cruel, they were into it. They tried. So it's not all that far-fetched. So when Jesus spoke of Peter stretching out his hands, it's very likely that Jesus was talking about them stretching his hands out on the cross, and being girded was being tied to that cross where he would be led to a place he didn't want to go, carrying that cross on his back. The Scriptures tell us that dying for the name of Christ is a death that glorifies God. So many passages talk about that and reassure us of that truth. The last words of verse 19 are, "Follow me." Peter followed even to a death of the cross. Peter's redemption, we find here, is a task. Feed my sheep. Tend my lambs. And it is a cross. I should say a commission and a cross. That goes a little better, right? Follow me. Tend my sheep, follow me, a commission and a cross, or a commission and a cross. Jesus left these very same words for you and I. Luke chapter 9, verse 23, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Luke 14, 27, and whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. That is an example for us of serving God, of being faithful and obedient all of our lives. Let me ask you, as you look at this and you examine yourself, does Jesus know that you love Him? Would He ask you time and time again, do you love me? Does He know that you love Him because of the service that you offer in the kingdom? Is Jesus assured of that love? Do you have the assurance that because of your obedience and your commitment to Christ that your soul is ready if you were called today? Depending on how you answer that question, determines the action that you take from here. If you believe that you would go to heaven if today was it for you, then I say to you, go home tonight and sleep well. But if you answered no, or you answered, I'm not sure, maybe you should respond to the gospel tonight. Maybe you should repent tonight of whatever it is that keeps you from being sure. Because we're told in 1 John chapter 5, verse 13, he says, I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know that you have eternal life. You can leave here with confidence in the condition of your soul tonight. And if you're not confident, I hope you'll come.